don't even know where to start. While districts all across the country, in our state, and in this very county have found a way to get their children back to school, District 428 is still spinning its wheels, paralyzed by fear, hyperbole, and what can only be termed as inertia. While businesses, our local restaurants and industries default to getting back to work as soon as possible by doing what it takes, the schools remain shuttered. This fall, the board chose, under enormous pressure from the teachers union, to delay indefinitely, because everything in this district has been indefinite lately, our students returned to in-person learning. At that meeting, a union representative shared a staff survey data that showed teachers were scared to return to work. When a board member asked about the county's data on COVID, the union member stated that they weren't concerned about data, rather feelings were their only measure. I believe this was the board's opportunity, albeit a missed one, to clarify that making informed, not impassioned decisions is their job. At their fingertips that night, the board had data. The parent survey showed that over 50% of parents wish to send their students back to in-person learning. As weeks and months have passed, District 428 has stood alone, with no target for getting our children back to school. I can't believe that my wife and I are alone in feeling that, while other districts leaned toward opening all along and came up with plans to make it happen and executed those plans, our district has been leaning the other way since March. In the board literature, I've read letters from staff who worry about the lack of subs and specials and insurmountable obstacles of getting our kids back to in the classroom where they belong. It is no small task, I'm sure, but others are doing it and doing it well. On the bright side, since we're about the last district to do this, there has to be tons of information out there on how it's done. We can look at districts all around us. Have there been outbreaks? There have been sub shortages for years, but to my knowledge, we've never canceled a school year because of it. We have a wealth of talent in this district and lots of brain power. I'm certain that if we defaulted to getting our kids back to school, it would have been done already. Everyone in this room knows that remote learning is not the best way for students to learn. As a dad, I can tell you that 3 hours a day on a Chromebook does not equal a full day of in-person instruction with the great teachers my kids have had. I know that this board is concerned about our students with the greatest needs. You have test scores, IEPs, 504s, and all kinds of other data telling you who those kids are. And I understand that some of those kids return to school today, thank goodness. I submit to you, however, that you may not think you know, and you may not know where the needs are. But how much are we missing? Since March, students have sat in their homes, isolated from their peers and the professional staff of their schools. How many have been floundering academically, socially, emotionally? How many students weren't struggling last March are struggling now? How is our current program working? The answer is nobody knows. And for us parents and our children, that is scary. Okay, can I finish my sentence? Members of the board, if you look at everything objectively, all things point to our getting back to in-person instruction for all our kids as soon as possible. It's time to look at the data, solve the problems, and default toward learning. Thank you.
Okay, next we have public comment from Kate Cardella. And it says, dear members of the board, interim superintendents, and D428 leadership, as an elementary teacher in D428, I write this letter asking for educators to be invited to the table for any possible discussions related to student reentry. As major stakeholders in what we understand to be a very fluid situation, we have ideas, suggestions, questions, and concerns. We'd like to be heard as much as possible. We welcome surveys, conversations with curriculum teams, our instructional coaches, and grade level teams. Please keep us part of the conversation. Okay, next we have board correspondence. Does anyone have updates, board correspondence? Okay, next we have consent agenda. The recommended action is that it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda items A through L, board meeting minutes, personnel action items, purchase order requisitions, accounts payable, financial reports, payroll, approval of dual credit English 103 and 104 courses, approval of life skills, science, and social studies courses, acceptance of donation of kindergarten toolkits, acceptance of a donation of $7,000 for HARP purchase, approval of budget calendar for the fiscal year 2020 through 2021, and approval of recommendation revisions to Board of Education policies. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, shoot. Okay, roll call?
Smith McDavid,
Yes.
Sarah Moses,
Yes.
Victoria Newport. Yes. Jeremy Olson,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
David Seymour,
Yes.
Jeff Holgren.
With a very special thanks for that $7,000. It was very generous. Yes, yes.
All right, next we have the superintendent's report and presentations, and the subject is the reentry update of the reentry plan. Mr. Griff Powell.
Oh, thank you. Tell me if my volume is appropriate. Beginning today, our special needs students in the following programs return to Soul K-12, Early Childhood, Developmental Communications, Target, grades 4 to 12, Academic Intensive, 4 to 12, 18 to 21 program, Project Surge ELL, limited grades 9 to 12. Our high school intensive program and Target programs will begin on January 25th. The DeKalb Health Department deemed it to be safe for return to in-person learning. In fact, as was just stated, every other district in DeKalb County returned to in-person learning to some extent today. Tomorrow, we'll be informing the community and staff of the following plan for a return to in-person learning, utilizing the hybrid approach previously presented to the board and community. On Monday, February 1, pre-kindergarten grades 1 and 2 will return in person on a hybrid program. On Monday, February 5th, grades 3, 4, and 5 will return in person. On Tuesday, February 16th and 17th, grades 6 and 9 will be returning on in-person. 6 and 9 graders will have 2 days to become acclimated to their new schools. They've never been in their schools. Finally, on Thursday, February 18th and Friday, February 19th, grades 7, 8, 10, 11, and 12 will be provided in-person learning, albeit on an A-B hybrid schedule. We fully expect some challenges considering our staffing limitations. However, we are convinced in-person learning is in the best interest of our students. Finally, we reserve the right to take adaptive pause if conditions dictate going back to solely remote learning. We realize that some people will be rolling their eyes and saying, well, another set of targets. I believe all the conditions based, here in DeKalb County give us the green light to move ahead on in-person learning just as the plan is laid out. So that's our intent, and the communication will come out tomorrow to the community and all staff.
Okay, questions or comments?
Sarah, if I may, I would like to applaud the getting back into school as a teacher. I think that it is at long last that we rejoin our peers, or that the students rejoin their peers. And so I can't tell you how relieved I am that we're doing this, that we're getting back as quickly as we can. And I would have it be a little quicker, but I look to the leadership of our two interim superintendents and look to their leadership to guide us through this particular bit of water getting back in. So I cannot tell you how relieved I am that we are doing this and that we are moving towards getting back to a regular kind of environment, teaching environment for our students. And thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Anyone else have comments, questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item, which is the adoption of the resolution abating the working cash fund of Community Unit School District number 428. Ms. Cynthia Carpenter, this is an action item. And the recommended action is that it is recommended that the Board of Education adopt the resolution abating the working cash fund of Community Unit School District number 428, DeKalb County, Illinois, in the amount of $313. Is there a motion?
With comment, yes.
Second? Did somebody second?
Second.
Oh, I didn't even turn my volume up. Did you get it? Did someone say second? I'm sorry. Okay. Roll call?
Sarah Moses.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
I would have Ms. Carpenter give us a very, very quick overview of what we're voting on, or give so the public knows what we're voting on this.
Yep, absolutely. So this is part of the property tax relief grant dollars that we received last year and as well this year. And this is year 2 of the requirement that we have to abate bond and interest. So basically it's reducing our tax levy by a total of $5,037,155. The state has given us funds, which is $4,723,842 to support the abatement. The difference is the $313,000 plus for that we have to take out of our operating funds in order to make the entire $5 million abatement. So there's this abatement, the transfer of the funds from our working cash to our debt service fund, and then the next item that you'll be considering is the actual resolution that we have to file with the county as well as with the state to do that actual abatement of bond and interest for our 2020 tax levy. So this is really an extension of our 2020 tax levy that we looked at in December. So this is finalizing that whole abatement process. And we need to do this by March, so we're way ahead of the game on this to get it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Roll call?
Sarah Moses.
Yes?
Victoria Newport.
Yes.
Jeremy Olson.
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez.
Yes.
David Seymour.
Yes.
Jeff Hallgren.
Yes.
Samantha McDavid.
Yes.
Next is the resolution abating a portion of the taxes heretofore levied for the year 2000 to pay debt service on the general obligation refunding school bonds series 2019, general obligation refunding school bonds series 2020 for the purpose of including the property tax relief grant amount in the district's evidence-based funding minimum. Action item, it is recommended that the Board of Education adopt the resolution abating a portion of the taxes heretofore levied for the school year 2020 to pay debt service on the general obligation refunding school board series 2019, general obligation refunding school board series 2020 of Community Unit School District number 428, DeKalb County, Illinois, for purposes of including the property tax relief grant amount in the district's evidence-based funding minimum. Is there a motion?
Second.
Okay, roll call?
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Jeremy Olson,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
David Seymour,
Yes.
Jeff Hallgren,
Yes.
Samantha McDavid,
Yes.
Sarah Moses.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Cynthia. Next is the bid results, flooring replacement at Brooks Elementary School, Ms. Tammy Carson. And this is an action item. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve bid base 1 for Brooks Elementary School corridor flooring replacement, consolidated flooring in Addison, Illinois, in the amount of $77,962, and base bid for number 2 for Brooks gym flooring replacement, Dynamic Sports Construction from Leander, Texas, in the amount of $79,259. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
No, hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sam, go ahead.
I just wanted it known by the board. My country. All right. There was some information brought forth today from our asbestos company that there was some trace asbestos found in 2 color floor tiles at the building, and there is a potential increased cost of up to $12,000 for the abatement of those colored tiles. We are going to be looking at options that we may be able to handle it in-house because our staff is trained for floor tile abatement up to a certain amount. So we will be looking at it, but there could be an additional cost to this project up to approximately $12,000 that could be coming forth if we do have to hire the asbestos company to do the abatement.
I have a question, Sarah, if I may.
Sure, Jeff.
Tammy, just for clarity's sake, do we at Brooks do the same thing that we do at other schools where we use it for multiple purposes and this flooring is designed for uses? Do we do lunch, for instance, on this floor, and do we do other things on this floor?
Yes, in the gymnasium, this is a multi-purpose room gymnasium, so it does have to handle lunch tables. It'll be the same flooring we put in at Founders, as well as Tyler and as another project.
Right.
For the corridors, it'll be an LVT project, which is the luxury vinyl tile, which is a no wax tile in the corridors, so that in the hallways, so that we will have less wax needed on an annual basis over the summer months. And it's a tile that holds up really well in our school buildings, and it's what we install when we replace vinyl tile now.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions? I'm good, okay. Roll call?
Can I just clarify that we are voting on the HVAC, correct?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Sarah brought forth the flooring first, but we will have to do back bid results. It was actually before this on the agenda. But both projects will need to be approved. This one is the Brooks flooring project, though, is what she presented so far. That's okay. So if we can continue with the flooring approval and then back to HVAC.
And HVAC.
No problem. So, I'm sorry about that, Shannon. So, yeah, for the flooring.
Okay, so for the flooring, Valerie Pena Hernandez?
Hold on 1 second. I've got a question. So, Tammy, it sounds like there's a potential additional.
Hang on, David. Can you hear him? Okay, sorry, David, go ahead.
So it sounds like there may be an additional $12,000 added to this number. So collectively, are we voting for the number that was put in, or the number that was put in plus the additional 12,000 if necessary?
You're voting for the numbers that are listed in the board rec, because those are the contracts to the 2 different contractors that are listed in this document. If we should need to do the asbestos abatement up to that $12,000 or to approximately $12,000, that's actually can be done without a formal bid to the abatement companies, which would be different than these companies. Because it's under the threshold, we would be able to get multiple quotes to ensure we're getting the best price, but it wouldn't be these 2 contractors that would be awarded the work. It would be a separate contractor altogether, and is within rights to be able to commit to that contract without bringing it forth to the board.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Tammy. Just a couple with that. So we don't know if there's asbestos, or we do?
in the purple and the blue color tiles, even though the building was built in 99, and we have a statement saying there would be no asbestos anywhere in the building. We still, out of a caution, we always still do a testing in a project like this, and it came back as trace for blue and purple. And then the testing came through, and one of the 3 samples did still show that there was asbestos in those colored tiles. So we have to do proper abatement for blue and purple and the surrounding tiles of the blue and purple to abate it properly during removal.
Okay, so I guess the issue is we didn't test it before we budgeted. We had a budget for the tile and then later discovered it. Got it. Okay.
That's correct. Based on the assumption of the 1999 build and the architect statement at that time that said there would be no asbestos anywhere in this building.
Right. They're not going to cut us a check for 12 grand because they lied to us?
Not for the 1999. I'm not sure we can find it.
Okay. Thank you.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
David Seymour,
Yes.
Jeff Hallgren,
Yes.
Samantha McDavid,
Yes.
Sarah Moses,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Jeremy Olson.
Yes.
Next is the bid results for the HVAC improvement at Jefferson and Littleton Elementary School. Tammy Carson. Recommended action is that the Board of Education approve the base bid number 1 for Jefferson Elementary School HVAC improvements. One Source Mechanical from DeKalb, Illinois, in the amount of $264,870, and the base bid number 2 for Little John Elementary School HVAC improvements. Is there a motion?
Well, the first one is recommending approval of base bid 1. The second statement is rejecting base bid number 2 and not moving forward with the Little John project, just for clarification. Okay.
So move.
Second.
Roll call?
Jeremy Olson, Jeremy Olson,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
David Seymour,
Yes.
Jeff Hallgren,
Yes.
Samantha McDavid,
Yes.
Sarah Moses,
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes.
Okay, next
May I
is
ask a question about that
proposal to
one?
increase the daily substitute teacher pay rate through the
Hold on.
Sorry. So we approved rejecting the bid for the one at Little John. What are the ramifications of not doing that project?
At this point, we feel we can continue another year before we bring this forth for approval. When we were comparing both projects and the fact that that project did end up coming in significantly higher than planned because of the need to replace the lights and ceiling, we felt with the other projects we have on our plate this year, it was best to delay that a year. It's not that the system is failing. It is that it's end of life, but our maintenance department is able to keep it running without any problems at this point. And when we looked at both projects, we felt that Jefferson was a higher need at this time over Little John.
Thanks, Tammy.
That sounds very responsible, Tammy. Thank you very much. Appreciate you doing that.
Okay, so next is the proposal to increase the daily substitute teacher pay rate through 2020-2021 school year. Ms. DeTrosalis?
By the way, last August, one of our board members suggested that we increase up pay. It's taken us a while to put this proposal on the table. I don't believe that necessarily throwing money at problems solve them, so this may not solve the problem that we have. However, in getting in line with other districts and being as competitive as possible, we hope will make a difference. Deidre, would you want to add anything to that? We're talking about a $20 increase from 110 to 130.
Yep, I agree completely with what Dr. Powell shared. The increase is minimal, and it is just through the rest of the school year.
Temporary.
Temporary. And it is for, I'm sorry, I said minimal. I meant to say temporary. And it is for our daily subs and for our annual employed building subs.
Well, as a person that was involved in talking to Griff and Ray about this particular project, I feel very strongly that this will make us much more competitive, and I think we need to be very competitive in this area if we're going to get our kids back into school. And I just feel that this is a very necessary move for this particular year, and we'll have to revisit it at another time.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. It is recommended that the Board of Education consider the temporary increase in pay for daily and annually employed substitute teachers for the remainder of the 2021 school year. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
David Seymour. Sorry, David.
Roll call?
David Seymour,
Yes.
Jeff Holgren,
Yes.
Samantha McDavid,
Yes.
Sarah Moses,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Jeremy Olson,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez.
Yes.
Okay, next is gas and electric procurement, Tammy Carson and Cindy Carpenter. This is discussion information.
So I'll get it started here. We are in the second year of our contract with Constellation Energy, who handles our electric and gas. We started that contract 2 years ago in July of 2019, and it expires in June of 2021, so this year. In the past years, we've worked with a company called American Energy Analysis, but in 2017, that person retired, and then the last time we went through this bid process for utilities, we did it internally ourselves. And honestly, it is quite an arduous process because energy is a commodity that changes prices pretty much probably hour by hour. And so we are looking at using a company called Nania Energy Advisors to help us with this process. And Tammy, I'll let you introduce Becky Thompson. She's here on the meeting. She's going to go through a brief presentation in terms of what she does to help many school districts with the process of securing energy.
Thank you. Like Cindy has said, Becky Thompson is on the call, the Google call, and we'll go through some information in regards to the relationship we can have with this company. I've known Becky for a number of years through our facility management group through IASBO, as well as other vendors, and we, after many discussions with Becky over the past year, with Cindy and her team, we feel this is something we'd like to pursue with DeKalb School District. So I'm going to turn it over to Becky and let her explain how that relationship could benefit our district going forward.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Can everyone hear me okay? Beautiful.
Very clear.
Perfect. I'm not sure. I'm going to try and pull up some slides to share with anyone who's not. I'm going to just pick a window and see if this works. So please bear with me. I'll make sure that all this technology that we get to try and utilize.
That worked.
Did that work perfect? We're okay? Do you
Yes.
see the notes page or do you see the regular page?
We see your lead screen, Becky.
Perfect. Okay, so like Tammy and Cindy mentioned, we've been discussing kind of the energy procurement for DeKalb 428 over the past year. So this evening, I'll keep it brief because I know you have quite a few items to cover. Just kind of want to give you an idea of what's going on in the energy market and why it's relevant to you. As I mentioned, the contract's not being up until June, and you clearly have other items on your plate right now, why we are bringing this forward at this time, as well as some of the different options that are available to you and what that means for your bottom line as it relates to natural gas and electricity procurement. Welcome questions throughout the presentation, but also have opportunity to answer any that you have at the end as well. So as previously mentioned, you did utilize a third-party consultant in the past, and then within the last bid process, handled it directly, and both of those contracts are expiring here in June. And so why isn't it important to talk about this now, especially as you're kind of facing student reentry and those kinds of other very important issues at hand, is that the energy market is not insulated from any of the events that we have been experiencing. This graph represents kind of the natural gas projections as put out by the Department of Energy. And going forward over the next 6 to 12 months, there's obviously many factors that are going to contribute to prices increasing. No one has a proverbial crystal ball. We don't know with any amount of 100% certainty where prices are going to go, but we have to evaluate the risk of the marketplace, especially when taxpayers' dollars are at hand. And so things that we are taking into consideration now are obviously geopolitical factors, change of administration, the ongoing effects of the pandemic, and how a vaccine and manufacturers and industries ramping back up, putting more demand and strain on the marketplace, what is that going to mean for pricing, coupled with the fact that last year in March, we hit some of the lowest prices of all time, right before COVID-19 happened, where 50% of production in U.S. pretty much came to a streaking halt, right? So demand completely fell off, and that means that producers were not making any money. It was lowest prices of all time, and no one was using energy. And so domestic production of energy actually went down over 50% and has not returned to full capacity. But what has returned and is at all-time highs is increased exports. We're actually a leading exporter of natural gas right now in the liquefied form. Reason being that other countries like China are paying 7 times what producers can get here domestically. So when we put everything all together, we have the potential for demand to return domestically. Production has not returned, and we're exporting more than we ever have in the past. So you take that all into account, and this graph that we're looking at here, the STEO, stands for Short-Term Energy Outlook Forecast. The Department of Energy is predicting a 30% increase in energy prices by the end of 21. So we felt that it was important to bring this to your attention now and evaluate your options sooner than later as a risk management effort, and to avoid a further increase down the road. So this graph just illustrates, I know that it's a lot of squiggly lines, but this just illustrates what we were just talking about. This is real-time natural gas forward pricing. Again, when we're talking about energy purchasing, you're buying today what you're going to use tomorrow. So you're always purchasing on the futures commodity marketplace. And you can see here where in March of 2020, we did hit that low point. This is going back the last 3 years, and it has been on a steady incline ever since. Still, you know, looking at this graph, we still have very favorable pricing at hand. It's just that this trend is expected to continue to increase. Again, why we are having this discussion sooner than later.
Hey, Becky.
Yes.
Excuse me, Sarah. I need to ask a question here, or at least I need to clarify something.
Sure.
Most of the people listening at home, if there are people listening at home,
Uh-huh.
buy their energy directly from the producers. If you could just give us a 30-second or a 2-minute rundown as to why we are buying from you, or why we would use you or the services of your company in this situation. In other words, you're a buffer between us and those producers.
Right, exactly. That's an excellent question, and thank you for having me clarify. Yes, so for most residents, you have ComEd, Commonwealth Edison, for your electric, and you may have NICOR or Ameren for your natural gas, and that's who your bill comes from every month, and that's who you pay. For larger energy users and for both private and public sector, Illinois is what's called a deregulated state, which gives you the optionality to purchase outside of your utility to create competition, to create budget certainty, and to shop around. ComEd still owns the power lines. They're still who you call in an outage, but there are third-party energy suppliers in which you can purchase the commodity only, just the juice, just the gas, and you know, for the benefits that I just mentioned. And so what we're discussing here are the options for evaluating the different suppliers, the different procurement methods of how to select those suppliers to ensure that we're doing right by the public and securing the best rate, making sure that it is a fair, competitive, and transparent bidding process, and ensuring longevity and cost management for your utilities, since it is such a substantial spend for a school district of your size.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
So Becky, I'm just curious, obviously, you're a consultant
Yeah.
In the energy business. Just to
Yeah.
clarify, we wouldn't be buying anything from you.
Correct.
We'd
Correct.
be listening to you as to who we should buy from.
Right.
Do you have, and I don't want to usurp your presentation here because it probably exists later on and I haven't already looked at it, my apologies, but the question being is, I assume that you're advising us based on your experience in forecasting.
Yes.
And if you have some examples of that, I'd be thrilled to see those.
Yeah, so forecasting, using historical data to kind of predict where we're going in the future, but more just reading the market as it currently stands, all those factors that we just previously discussed, through both the procurement process and almost more importantly after as well. So we are a consultant, and so we would be advising throughout the term of a contract should you enter one with a third-party supplier. To your point, we would not be the billing company. You would be paying the, like Constellation, for example, is one of our partners. You would still be remitting payment to Constellation. We are helping in the procurement process. As Cindy described, it can be quite arduous, making sure that there are apples to apples comparisons when you are running a bid, making sure that the contract language is favorable for the school district and not for just the supplier. And then also presenting opportunities throughout the new contract, not just waiting until an expiration of the contract to get together and come before you. But as we saw here, you know, the lowest price of all time being March of 2020. March of 2020 last year was quite a busy month for me because we were informing all of our clients of the opportunity at hand. So it's really about the consistent messaging and consulting services that we provide to ensure a long-term cost management solution and not just a one-time low bid sort of scenario. Does that answer your question fairly?
Well, not exactly. I guess what I was, and that just probably means I asked it poorly. What more so, I guess I was looking for is where's your proof source to tell me why you're a good consultant and I should hire you instead of some other consultant?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, well then in that case, yes, I'm covering that here in the next few slides.
Thanks.
Sure. So with that, that's a perfect segue. So thank you for the question.
Not at all.
As it comes to procurement options, a lot of school districts go out to bid, similar in style to how you have in the past. Well, recall it's called a sealed bid, and that's basically you build your RFP solicitation, you send it out to suppliers, and you say, hey, on this Tuesday at 10 a.m., send me your best and final bid. You receive a bunch of emails, sort through them, try to discern top from bottom, put it in a nice little spreadsheet, present it to the board, select the low bidder, and then sign a contract. And that's a vital part of our process that we also complete. But we use it more as a way to qualify suppliers to make sure that they are responsive to our RFP parameters and the requirements at hand. But then we take it a step further, and this may answer your question as to our efficacy in the education space specifically, is we take those qualified suppliers from that first sealed bid and we put them in what's called a reverse auction. And so we think of eBay, but in reverse. We take those suppliers, we put them in a live competitive format where they're basically vying for your business, submitting multiple bids. Since we've already qualified that they've met all RFP parameters, everything is a true apples to apples, you, the consumer, then benefits and then submitting multiple bids to lower your overall cost. So over a 15-minute live auction, these suppliers see the price that they need to beat, and they're submitting multiple bids knowing what they need to hit in order to win your business. So it's a completely transparent process, but it is extremely competitive and drives down supplier margins and gives them all a fair opportunity to secure your business. And the reason that we introduce this is that we've been in business 20 years, and we would traditionally, like most companies, just run the sealed bid. And I can't tell you how many times we receive phone calls from suppliers after the fact saying, why didn't you tell me where I needed to be? I could have sharpened my pencil. And to us, we're not doing right by our clients and as consultants, knowing that we're leaving money on the table. So we wanted to discover a way that we could extrapolate any additional margin, get to the lowest possible cost, but also do right by our supply partners and giving them a fair opportunity to get to that bottom number, or at least disclose what that number is so that they know if they're not winning, they knew where they needed to be in order to win that. So like I mentioned, I did have a little graphic here that I think is not going to, well, maybe it is. Let's see if it'll show up. So as I mentioned, it's all a timestamp trail, so it meets all the FOIA requirements. You, the board members, could actually participate in this. You could watch it live as it's happening. We also record all events so that you have that documented trail if anyone ever asks you about your due diligence in performing the bid process. We know that public transparency is extremely important, more now than ever before. And ultimately, the margin compression after running thousands of auctions, securing 3 to 5% savings versus that first initial sealed bid qualifying round to drive down that rate. And so in creating this competitive platform, it drives down your rate an additional 3 to 5%. And we'll talk about here in just a minute what that means for you in real live numbers. Does anyone have any questions about this kind of process and what makes it different or unique?
As a vendor, I can tell you I've never liked them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's definitely a love-hate relationship with our supply partners. They love the transparency, but they also hate that it drives down their margins. But the reality is that in a commodities marketplace where all things being even, if contract language terms are all the same, it's the same exact product with the same exact components that are all included. At the end of the day, we're talking about electricity and natural gas. We're not talking about office chairs where quality becomes an issue. The same electricity that comes from Constellation is the same electricity that's coming from Dynegy or any of the other suppliers. So it re-commoditizes a commodity market. And so while suppliers may not love that they're not making big, fat, juicy margins, especially in the public space with larger school districts, making money isn't always their greatest initiative. Sometimes it's just finding a home for their supply, especially any that are generation backed. They are trying to keep their doors open, and so they need a home for any electricity that they're generating. And so there are multiple factors that come into play, and this is a way to kind of see those winners rise to the top and gives them the opportunity to do so. We have seen several auctions where suppliers will actually essentially give it away, right? They're not making any money on the supply portion just because they need a home for that generation supply. So it's a truly efficient way to secure and make it a fair and transparent process, especially in the public space.
And just to wrap that up, or not wrap it up for you, but just to wrap it up for the people at home, this benefits us. And when it benefits us, it benefits our taxpayers in the sense that we're driving the cost of this commodity down, and we are then paying less money out for it.
Right, exactly. So the idea is this is a way to get the lowest price of the market on any given day by giving every supplier the opportunity to provide their lowest cost and the opportunity to submit multiple bids. So what you see on this graphic here, hopefully that it's translating well to those at home, each little dot that you see on these lines represented is an additional bid that was submitted for 4 respective terms, 1, 2, 3, and 4-year terms, all congruent to one another in the same auction. So one supplier, instead of just submitting one bid for the 1 year, one bid for the 2, so on and so forth, they could submit 7 or 8 bids for the 1-year term. And so rather than collecting, say, we have 5 suppliers participate in our sealed bid, so that means that they each submit, maybe 3 or 4 bids, 1 for each term. We're getting 60 to 70 bids. And we've run this for about 24 school districts locally, and those have been the results. And so that's where my numbers come from. And I had previously provided references to Cindy and Tammy and the team for them to talk to live local school districts who've run this process and what the results were for them and how they felt about it. So as I previously talked about, for me, 3 to 5% savings of your energy costs doesn't mean a whole lot if I can't put numbers to it. So these are hypothetical. We have not done any thorough analyses. We have not evaluated your bills. And so these are just hypothetical based off of how an estimate of what I think the usage may potentially be for 428. So this is just a hypothetical scenario. So I always want to make sure that I'm clear about that. But if we assume that your annual electricity usage is about 15 million kWh a year, taking a sealed bid standardized rate, you're paying margins for a supplier, whether you have a direct relationship because you have a sales rep that's representing you in a direct relationship, or if you're using a third-party consultant like you did a few years ago, there's margin built into the fixed rate that you are receiving, even in a sealed bid. So say that the results that you got last time were 6.1 cents per kilowatt hour. So then conservatively take those same numbers, same suppliers, we qualified them, we do the contract negotiations, then we put them into the reverse auction platform. And we look at the 5% savings based off of the commodity cost, right? So that's what you're seeing here. Again, our margins would be included as part of your fixed rate. We never bill the district directly. It is if and only if you select one of our suppliers from our bidding process. Once that contract starts, any bids that are received via the sealed bid or the auction is inclusive of our fees, and we can disclose what those are to you. You can see that this means about $37,000 annually savings for the district just by utilizing the auction platform beyond the sealed bid that you've done in the past.
Cindy, I'm sorry, Tammy. Do you know off the top of your head what our kilowatt hours is per year? Was that something we've looked at? I was just ballparking. I wasn't asking for exact.
On
No.
the top of my head, no. That's actually managed through some individuals in Cindy's office, so I don't necessarily have it specifically in front of me.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that as well, just off the top of my head, to be honest.
Okay. Well, it would just be good for the comparative.
We could provide that out to the board after we're able to pull that information if you would like.
That's cool. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
You bet.
And this also only takes into account the electric. We can also include one for the natural gas as well, so you can see a cumulative between both commodities.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. So that,
Oh, I'm sorry, Becky. And the plan here was, this was informational at this meeting. We would bring it back to the next meeting for your consideration to secure Narnia as a partner with us, and then we can provide that information next meeting as well about what our kilowatt hours are and what our usage has been on an annual basis. So,
yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, Becky, but could you spin back through? You were starting to talk about how you get compensated, and for saving us $36,000 a year. Can you just run through that again for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you see here on this sample, because the cost of running an auction, it is a real software platform, and we're doing the analyses, the RFP bid solicitation, everything up front. Again, we're not paid unless you select a supplier and once that contract starts. So everything essentially we're doing out of pocket with no charge up front. And so our fees, because of the auction, the software itself is expensive, is a little bit higher, you can see here, than if you just went through a direct sealed bid process. So this $37,000 that we were talking about here is a net savings after our fees, even if they are a bit higher than going direct through a supplier or utilizing a sealed bid RFP directly.
It's like 2.5 tenths of a cent or something, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's really tiny on my screen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Right. So it
Okay.
averages, I would say, about 2 to 3% of your total electricity cost is our typical fee. And again, it's a function of how complex the system is, or what it takes into account once we've actually done our analyses. But that's pretty much ballpark. That's pretty average.
Jamie, you can open it in board docs, the presentation.
Yeah, I know. I just didn't have it open, so I figured I'd just verify I was reading it correctly. Okay, so that's helpful. That I didn't read that because it was really tiny on my screen.
I apologize. It's also worth noting that none of this is obligatory. If you were to decide to utilize us and utilize the auction format, but running an auction doesn't mean that you have to accept an offer. It doesn't marry you to any sort of thing. So when we are asking for consent, it's purely to evaluate the process and see if it's what makes sense for the district. It's not necessarily approving an exact contract on that day. So just want to make that designation that there's not an obligation here. The only obligation is that if we go to auction, you love the auction rate, you accept the contract on the day of the auction, because since we've stripped out all margins and extra fluff that suppliers may build in, they don't have the capacity to hold the rate for 2 weeks until the next board meeting. And so I'm happy to describe that process either today or at the next meeting, how we kind of work that, if that would be beneficial to the board.
This is fine for me now. I just want to make sure I understood all the mechanisms and wanted to say it back to you just to make sure I was correct. So that's perfect for me. Thank you.
Are there any other slides that you'd like me to revisit, or I can stop sharing my screen and just answer questions freely?
I'm good. Thank you.
I'm good.
Sure. Does anyone else have questions? No? Okay.
A very thorough presentation. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Okay, so consensus to have
Yes.
Atkinson, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Becky.
Consensus?
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Becky.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have a request to purchase Chromebooks for one-to-one curriculum integration and request to quote to lease one-to-one devices. Mr. Ben Bale, Kim Lyle, and Cindy Carpenter.
A discussion item only. So, Ben?
Yes, so this is our 8th year of the Curriculum and Technology Initiative, and we are looking to purchase 1,700 Chromebooks, and this will be following the same rotation process that was agreed upon at the previous board meeting over a year ago. So this will be for incoming 3rd graders, 5th graders, and 9th graders. So again, we are achieving the 4-year ROI that we look for with the devices in the hands of students. And then we get a 5th year minimum ROI as they become part of our loaner pool. So the current costs are $445 each. This includes the 4-year unlimited accidental damage warranty, Google management licensing, securely content filtering, as well as the always-on hard shell case. So at this time, we are looking to move forward with the purchase of the 1,700 devices for the rotation cycle at a cost of $756,500, and then allowing myself in the business department to work towards getting quotes to lease the devices over a period of 3 or 4 years come February. And we're trying to get ahead here of the economic uncertainty that we have, as well as global uncertainty and increasing demand with things like COVID and other districts that we're competing against. So that's why we're bringing it just slightly earlier than we did last year, in the hopes of being able to procure the devices by June and having them rolling out in time for the school year.
Okay, questions?
Yes, I have a question, if I may, Sarah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Ben, what was our number last year? As I recall, it was a little higher. Was it?
Yeah, we were purchasing more devices the previous year in order to establish that one-to-one rotation cycle. So we were able to do that and then able to maintain the rotation cycle for 3rd, 5th, and 9th grade students.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Nope. Thank you, Ben.
Okay, consensus to bring this item back?
Wait, I'm sorry. I have a question. It's harder to get the mute button at home. I don't know. Ben, so right now our K through 2 also have Chromebooks. Those will be put back into like the site, or like the whole pool for loaners and stuff like that next year, hopefully? No.
No, so the hope is once we're at a normal, hopefully, after vaccinations and everything else, and our students are back in school, that those devices will go back into the classroom as full classroom sets. to continue doing one-to-one in the classroom for those age group of students. And if we find ourselves in needing to do remote learning and education again, then they're ready to go. But yep.
Thank you, Ben.
Any other questions?
You have my consensus to bring it back.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
I do
Consensus?
want to just say real quick, thanks to Ben, because he worked really hard with the vendor on the pricing, because they were really hitting hard in terms of the increase in prices, and he's been a great negotiator for the district and getting a really good price out there. So thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Ben. You have my consensus to bring it back.
Did you do a reverse auction by any chance?
I'll talk to Becky on that and see if they can do for Chromebooks too.
Okay, consensus to bring this back?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much, Ben.
Okay, next is middle school and high school grading and support for students, Mr. James Horn, Mr. Brant Boyer, Ms. Monica Parker, and Ms. Kim Lyle.
I'd like to ask Kim to, I guess, introduce the topic. This is obviously an issue the board is concerned about, and through the pandemic, we've had to give additional support for our staff, our students, excuse me, to mitigate some of the impact of the pandemic and being fully remote. So with that, Kim?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me on here? Yes. Yes, we wanted to share tonight some of the supports that the middle school and the high school put in place to help students be more successful, along with the grading practices that they started the year with, and then some changes we made in December. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Boyer, Ms. Parker, and Mr. Horn.
Should I share the screen?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear okay. We'll go ahead and give a little update on the middle and high school grading and support for our students. We'll start off, Ms. Parker and I will start off with middle school, and then we'll let James all by himself take the high school. Looking at the middle school, we know we've been in trying times for sure throughout the pandemic of the spring and through this fall. There's some things that lent themselves well to us coming into this is our middle school philosophy, and especially the scheduling part of that, which allows us with the PLCs, but also allows us with our scheduling to have a team time for our staff, for our teachers. And I think that the big part of that is to allow them, and with the support staff, with administration, we push in weekly to meet with each team, on top of them meeting even more than that, to identify and support students that are struggling. And I think one place that we do have that, which now I know the high school and Mr. Horn will talk more about that with the PLC, but that it allows us to set the kids up with the supports. It allows us to identify. It allows us to make the phone calls, the emails, do the home visits, get the SR officer involved. All those things that go into that allows well with that middle school philosophy and schedule. Parker, do you want to chime in? Okay, so I'll keep it going. In the summer, as Ms. Lyle had talked about, we did some systemic practice changes to our grading. It lends well to us being in a pandemic, but it's also something that we, in looking through the slides, it will be something that lends itself well coming out of the pandemic and being hopefully in normal school sometime in the near future. And I think some of those big things that we looked at was the late work, the redos, and then just the general Skyward gradebook overall. Late work, our teachers, okay, are allow and they accept assignments past the due date. Okay, this is something that we felt was very, it's something that needed to be done. So each grade level decided what they were going to give. It was a minimum of 2 weeks, but up until a quarter ends for us in the middle school, because we're on quarters instead of semesters. So it allows kids to get that reteaching. It allows them to redo things and resubmit in that overall basis of we're looking for mastery, the proficiency and mastery scale. So that was a bit of the redos I just talked about. How are students being supported? I talked a little bit about that. The office hours, same thing at the middle school and high school. We have office hours every day, 1:30 to 2:30. It is that expectation that, and at the middle school level, there's a good turnout. It's something where students are, they're invited to come, but actually, most often it is open and those students come. And at the middle school level, we really see that as part of that relationship building, that community building, where those kids really are there and they really want to get to know the teacher and those other students that they're not seeing on a daily basis in person. So the office hour is a place where the teachers are connecting, they're reteaching, and then allowing students to come in and redo things, retake assessments, especially those formative and summative assessments, but pushing those formative assessments, those frequent check-ins for that proficiency and that mastery. Another big one for us at the middle school level is, and this was huge coming out of the district SEL committee, is that we have MISSLE now, which is our middle school social emotional learning, and it is something where staff and teachers deliver a weekly social emotional lesson with all the students based on the students' needs. And these were developed over the summer and through the spring and through our student response surveys on which topics that they needed that support in. And I did already talk about the team time part of this, which team time, like I said, I can't state it enough that team time at the middle school concept is invaluable for our teaching staff and all the staff. And where are we going from here? This systemic grading practices that we look to tweak, this has been an ongoing thing from the last 4 years of the standards-based grading committee, and pushing through now to be in the pandemic of the spring and through the fall. It did lend itself well to continue these, and we will continue these practices and these grade adjustments and these best grading practices as we continue even after the pandemic. Right, and then that last part there was the standards-based grading committee, which I talked about, then a middle school committee that has been meeting for around 4 years now, and still frequently meeting now, and continue to make those changes in these next couple of years.
I have a few questions, Brent.
Sure.
So going back to the slides, the beginning, it's evident that the elementary school started some approach, correct, Kim, of standard-based grading.
Standards-based grading, yep, at elementary started, I think 4 years ago.
Okay, so I have several questions. This presentation, I guess I'm a little confused in several areas. And I've read Grading for Equity, so I guess I don't really understand what direction the middle school is taking in terms of changing their grading system, because you guys haven't moved to a standards-based approach, correct?
Right. So
Right.
can you hear me, Val?
Yeah.
So the committee has been working, and so these grading practices are some of the first ones they're starting. And then we hired Steve Ertl, who is phenomenal, and he is training all middle school staff every other Thursday right now, pretty often, in the whole model of standards-based grading, because we found that we needed everybody to be on the same page, not just the committee. And so that's the piece that they're going through now, to understand that. And then he's now going to start meeting with their teams as well, their PLC teams, to make the transition.
So that it brings me to my next question. So switching and trying to implement a different grading system without really, because going back to the first couple of slides, right? The first slide where it says that the student will, be able to show or demonstrate mastery, and until mastery is achieved, the student has the ability to show that. So how can you do that without necessarily? So I'm thinking about the grading as a parent. I'm not even thinking about the grading as a teacher. But if we're saying that we are changing our practices to reflect pretty much standards that are mastered or not mastered, how are we going to implement that without having standard-based grading is what I'm saying. Because just seeing the grades still are subjective to a certain degree until you actually have those standards that reflect. So as a parent, if I looked at a specific standard and that my student or my child didn't meet that, I could look at the grading book that's set up to show and reflect the standard, and therefore I could support my child. But if we're just if we're just saying we're changing it, but we're not really changing everything we're doing, then I guess I'm confused as to what exactly are we doing. And I'm not criticizing. Please understand that I'm all for it. I just want to make sure that we're not creating more confusion in the process, because when we make changes of this magnitude, I think it's important that we do them utilizing best practices and utilizing what we know, the data we have, along with how are we really going to set up the students if the goal is to have an equity lens with the grading, removing bias and ensuring that the student is able to self-reflect, right, on their process, along with the parents to support the student. So I guess I don't have a clear understanding of how we're going to achieve that,
So that's what they're working on now. They're identifying the priority standards. Then what is it taking to measure those and putting those rubrics together so that the students will be able to see those and understand how they're going to score each standard. So that's what's happening in the background. So while they're getting that done this year and into next year, they started changing some of the practices. So because we weren't accepting late assignments, we weren't letting kids redo things to meet a standard and master that standard. So we started to get them in that mindset to start working towards that. And then, of course, working with the trainer as well.
And I guess that's my question right there, Kim. They're working towards what? Because we haven't really identified clearly, right, in our grading book and our practices, the standards that they're working.
That's what they're doing now. They're identifying those now and getting that in order. And then the pandemic hit, but they're still going forward as if it didn't happen because we got to. And even we tweaked it this year, of course, some of the standards, but that's what they're working on now. And to be honest with you, me coming into this position, I thought more was done in this department than was. But now we are hitting the ground running with our new team and getting the job done. So pretty soon, as a parent, you will see those pieces. But first, we had to get the staff trained on how do you take your standards, tear them down, and then identify how the kids are going to meet those.
I have a question. Valerie, did you have another follow-up on that, or no?
No, thank you.
Sarah, if I may, please. I have a question. Kim, I guess Brant as well. It seems like we are putting a great deal more effort right now. I don't know if this is long-term, but right now it seems like from what your presentation was, we're putting an enormous amount of effort into follow-up, group meetings. We're having people that have problems or small groups that have problems get together. I'm wondering how much of, before we had that time to do that or took the time to do that, what were they doing that you are taking time away from? In other words, core curriculum? I mean, what is it? It seems like we're putting an enormous amount of effort into mitigation here, and I'm wondering if it's taking time. There can't be that much time in the day, so we got to be taking something away.
Right. The team planning time has always been there, and this is something that they have always done. We just wanted to share that with you, and of course they stepped it up even more. That time has always been built in the schedule.
Right. The team planning part. I'm talking about interaction with the students and helping them with doing extra learning and helping them with extra learning processes. I'm just wondering, it seems like it's a fair amount of mitigation. I mean, or a fair, I mean, not a fair amount, a very large amount of mitigation.
Right.
It's taking away from core.
Yeah. I get,
You can come up there.
Jeff, if this helps, I would say, can you hear me okay now that I'm on a different computer?
Yes, I can.
Yep. I think if I'm hearing you correctly, this is not taken away from that core time. It built into that support hour that we happen to have in hybrid is what they're using that time for. We've always, as Kim said, we've always had the team time. So that's always been there to identify and to look at different things, to be in different interventions. It is that support hour that's allowed us to gain more from it and help support those kids.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for explaining that.
Yep.
Were you joining us to answer a question?
I was going to explain really just the emphasis of the student support hours and how it's helpful, but he got it.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, there was and I don't know when a good time would be to introduce this, but we lowered our standard considerably for a passing grade, hugely. If I heard this correctly, we lowered it enormously. I'm wondering how we mitigate for that. In other words, how do we then bring back those people that got a passing grade at far less than we normally do? How do we bring them back? Are these the means by which we are bringing them back up?
Actually, can I jump in here?
Yeah, that would be
first of all,
going to high school.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Well,
good.
I guess a good time would be to tell me whether I heard that correctly, that we lowered that standard.
The grades were adjusted at the high school level, so that was unique to the high school.
I didn't know that. Thank you.
Okay. What is different, keep in mind, between high school and between middle school is at the high school level, we do have to issue credits towards graduation. So what we were faced with at the high school coming into it, we did take some proactive steps, very similar to the middle school. A lot of it had to do with time and the time that we were given to teachers. Think back to March, this board approved weekly collaboration time for our teachers. At that time, it was the start of the pandemic. We did not anticipate, or at least I did not, that we would be sitting here still trying to figure out how we were going to navigate through remote learning. That was a necessary move in the best interest of teaching and learning for our students at that time, because at that high school level, we did not have the weekly collaboration like you have at the middle school. That permitted time for teachers to come together and work on identifying essential standards necessary for students to master. Now, mind you, we're nowhere near standards-based grading yet, but that time and that work is necessary in order for us to get there. What the approval of the PLC time did in March was it actually gave us a tool to help us navigate through remote learning and through some of the obstacles that we were faced with as a result of the pandemic, and trying to narrow down exactly what it is we needed our students to know and to be able to do. Similar to the middle school, we added assessment retakes and assessment redos. We had current practices on file that did not permit that. We changed that because the rules of the game had been changed from our students through no fault of their own. While that was going on, we increased our home visits, we increased our contact time. We also have been collaborating with surrounding districts, with districts within our athletic conference, as well as other schools of a similar size to DeKalb, many of which are larger. And what we found is that everybody was faced with the same situation that we were faced with. A number of students not engaging in remote learning in the way that we would hope they would engage, and a record number of Fs. What was common between all of those districts was everybody was taking steps to change current practices, much of which it was in grading. Now, there wasn't a common, this is what we're doing, let's go through and do it. What was happening is every district was doing something that was different and unique depending on their own needs. Some districts took all Fs, zeros included, and put them at 50%. Some districts made it such that only A's and B's were counted towards the GPA, Anybody getting a C or a D would just get a passing grade. And anybody failing wouldn't get an F on the transcript, just would not receive credit. Some districts took away that semester checkpoint and allowed for expansion into second semester for kids to make stuff up. We, at the high school, DeKalb High School, made the determination to modify our grading scale. So what I have, the semester grades on a 4-year span of time, looking at what the averages would have been pre-COVID times as far as the cut points for A, B, C, and D. In green, what you have are the non-adjusted. In orange, you have the adjusted. Now, what you see is you see a sharp increase in A's. You see a sharp decrease in the number of F's. So, Jeff, to go back to your original question, what are we doing to mitigate for our students? Because we did lower the bar. We know that this was just addressing the symptom. This was not fixing the disease that we're faced with here. The goal here is to keep as many kids with us. We know that when students fall behind in credit, they are much more likely to drop out. So what our overall goal is to keep as many students from leaving our halls as possible, to keep them here with us and to keep them engaged. In conversations with other principals, they're seeing the same thing. They're seeing some steps that they're taking, increasing A's. So for example, had we made the determination to move all F's, including zeros, up to the 50%, what you would have is you would have a student who had a 0 because of a missed assignment that had a C, all of a sudden have that C go up to that 0 go up to a 50%. That would then kick them up to a B or to an A in theory. Students that are behind, there's so much in the way of what these students are dealing with as far as home life, as far as home environments, that any release that we can do, or relief that we can provide for them, does help them out. It also helps the system out by and large, because we didn't eliminate Fs, we just got them to a more manageable level. One thing that was interesting when we broke this down is when you look at the pre-adjusted as well as adjusted grade by our subgroups, it is disproportionately having an adverse effect on our students of color. Now, what I want to draw everyone's attention to is the achievement gap pre-adjusted as opposed to adjusted. We did not fix the achievement gap. The achievement gap existed pre-COVID. It is something we're constantly going to be working on. My biggest concern is how, when we come out of this remote era that we're in, how we continue to make gains on the achievement gap. We knew it was an issue. Historically, it's been an issue, and COVID is just really shedding light on that. Same is true when you look at the achievement gap by income level. At the high school, we have spent a significant amount of time in Freshmen on Track.
Go back to that last slide, please, James.
Sure.
Just stay on it for a second here.
Yep.
Okay, I just couldn't read the numbers. Thank you.
Yep. So the orange is the adjusted, the blue is the unadjusted.
Right. Thank you very much.
And so Freshmen on Track. Now, mind you, that is something the school is held accountable on ESSA. That is students at the freshman level, 5 credits and passing all of their core area, humanities, social studies, science, math, literacy for students who need that. We're seeing that same achievement gap happening, and we're still seeing that same dip. So we were at 89% at the end of first semester last year as far as freshmen being considered on track. This year, it did dip down to 68%. If you go back to when prior years, I went back on our school report card to school year 16, so it'd be the 15-16 school year, we were at 77% at the end of the school year as far as freshmen on track. So that is an all-time low. We know that our freshmen are up against a lot. Dr. Powell at the beginning spoke to the importance of bringing our freshmen back to get them acclimated to the building. They've never set foot in our halls. We know the learning curve that our freshmen are up against. They're 14 years old. The idea that credits have the impact on them, that is something that they have to learn from their teachers and from the system. We haven't had them in person and haven't had the opportunity to work with our students yet. So by allowing for this modification, we did ease some of the burden there. When you break it down both unadjusted as well as adjusted by subgroup, you see that same thing happening with our freshmen on track is disproportionately impacting our students of color as well as our students on free and reduced lunch.
Hold on,
Hey,
James. Hey,
Yes.
I have a question.
Absolutely.
Are the Hispanic population tied up in the Native Indigenous? I just didn't see that listed.
I don't. It should not be. There should have been on there. Let me get that number for you.
I mean, that's 30% of our student population, I think.
Correct.
It's missing
Correct.
from that slide. Thank you.
Yep.
And also, am I reading this correctly that if I looked at it by freshman on track income status wise, it appears that around 82% of kids are on track versus if I fly up here a couple slides, in 18 we were at 89, looks like 89 and 19. So we've seen about maybe a 6 to 7% dip in the non-low income, correct?
Correct.
As opposed to in the low income, what we're seeing more significant dip, right? Is that? So I'm curious, and this comes back to a couple things that we talked about last year, which is it's one thing, you know, to say, wow, this has never happened to us before, but this has happened to us before. Mm-hmm. And when we went from the spring semester, and we said, don't worry, by fall, we'll have it figured out. We are not going to adjust our grade levels like we did last year. We're not just going to pass people, but kind of, you know, we're putting a different set of lipstick on here, but we're doing the same thing. So clearly, we have a group of students that is struggling more so with remote learning than others. Mm-hmm. Are we looking forward? Because there will be other pandemics, even when this one passes at some point. I have to assume that some of them will be just like this or worse even potentially, right? So if you're looking ahead, let's have a plan, right? And I want to hear more about what are we doing to plan ahead for those groups of people who don't have the same resources as these other kids? Because we talked about this from the beginning. We knew this was coming. We knew this was going to happen, and it did. So, hey, we predicted, right? But we have to be more proactive. So what's being done, or what is the plan, or what money are we going to spend to research this to death, to figure out how do we capture these children in a remote format in a way that's more effective? I guess that's my ultimate question here. Okay. Thank you. I'll let you answer.
Okay, well, you went fairly large. So first and foremost, my hope is that future pandemics aren't quite as bad as this. I mean, I hope, you know, but you are absolutely right. We are going to be challenged with similar obstacles in the future. Just the idea of bringing students back. We talk about return to in-person learning. We're not talking about what in-person learning looked like in January of 2020, let alone January 2019. We know that remote learning is going to be part of what we're doing, at least for the rest of the school year. And let's be honest, next school year is probably going to look very similar to this year in the sense that social distancing is probably still going to be a thing based on a lot of the information that I'm seeing. We don't have vaccines out for students under 18 just yet. So looking forward to 21, 22, we have some things in the here and now that we can do to help increase students' credits. Some of that's going to be done through summer school, but that's what we were doing before to help students. Some of it is going to be through a return to in-person in a hybrid setting. So summer school, full-on remote last year, looking for ways to make sure we can support students in class, in person, in summer school for next year. More importantly, some of those, I think what you're getting to, some of those proactive steps, and how do we structure how we do things differently, because those achievement gaps, like I started off with, those existed beforehand. Many of them had to do with questions of equity. The school improvement team exploring grading practices, very similar to what the middle school is doing through grading through equity. The next step to that is making sure that those conversations are happening 6/12, so that freshmen on track for graduation, that's a focus kind of district-wide, not just something that's happening at the freshman level. The most significant work that we can do is through that weekly PLC time and the review of localized data, meaning assessments given by the teachers, and those tier 1 assessments or those tier 1 interventions. Tier 1 interventions meaning we collectively as a Algebra 1 team, as a Humanities 2 team, whatever fill in the blank team, came together around the assessment we just ran. We noticed the kids are struggling with this and doing things differently because of that. Not just the test retake to get the grades up, but actually instructing differently and giving that opportunity for that redo, not just to earn grades, but to truly prove mastery. So to go back to the conversation that was happening when the middle school was presenting, that idea of truly gaining mastery, that work and making sure that that's done with fidelity, that is that next step to help us navigate it. The biggest tool we had to help us navigate the remote learning in the pandemic was that PLC time and the collaboration time. So moving forward, making sure that that time is, we continue to build on it and we continue to make those movements forward, will help us be responsive to whatever it is that obstacle is in front of us. If it's a future pandemic, if it is a variation of remote or hybrid learning, as long as we're focused in the work that we're doing as we move forward. Other things we're working on is we've got their social emotional learning, Y-Try, MTSS, providing professional development for our teachers. All of that is being done in the here and now.
And I appreciate that. And the reason I bring this up, and Jeff, I'll just because it's coupled with my last question, is well, for instance, my kids obviously just left, to go to college, so they're seeing in their very first semester the difference between online learning in college versus online learning in high school. And I can tell you, for my daughter, 77 is an F, as opposed to 45 as a senior. So there's a significant challenge in front of these kids. And so I guess my thing was, we do have committees for things. I might recommend we look at a task force specifically around remote learning, because we may be in and out of remote learning a dozen more times over the next year. And to have a group of people come together, just like any of these meetings I go to, like FFAC and social justice, we should have a group, I would believe, coming together to discuss specifically this, taking away tasks of, hey, you know what, I'm going to go see what they're doing in California. I'm going to go online. I'm going to make calls to other states, other districts, other countries. Like, what can we do to figure out how to best address a remote environment? Because it's an expectation at the next level for these high school kids, even that they can do it on their own. So we have to find a way to make that work here, in my personal opinion. I'm one of 7, but I think most of you would agree, as I'm seeing some nodding heads. So I would encourage and love to see something like that happen, James, I guess is where I was headed with that. Because I am concerned that we may be in and out of this remote situation many more times in the future.
That would be a smart move.
I agree, Jeremy. I agree with what you said, and I don't necessarily think that just the task force. I think it has to start, obviously. The conversation starts with our leaders, and then something where, like you said, more people become involved. But I think one of the biggest concerns for me is, the fact, and I understand, I work in Rochelle, and I wasn't necessarily there towards the end, but I became very aware of what Rochelle did, and I think Rochelle kind of took a different approach. We didn't lower the standards. We didn't lower the rigor. We increased the rigor in that sense. But what we did do is change how we met those needs. And so we pretty much adapted to the needs, accordingly. And so I think that what you're saying, Jeremy, is probably the biggest thing that I have right now. I have seniors that are going to graduate, and some of them are college and career path that, they want to go to college and they're going to go to college. And so what are we doing to prepare them? What are we doing to ensure that they're going to be successful there is the biggest concern that I think many of us are expressing. So I share your sentiment, and I think that we need to look at this with many perspectives in mind and utilizing multiple metrics or systems where we're making sure that we are meeting the needs of students, and the people that need to adapt are really us, right? Because we have to meet those needs.
Sarah, if I can, at some point here. So, a couple thoughts. Firstly, a thought is I have been itching to have this conversation for the last 3-4 months, so I'm glad we're having it tonight. I mean, this is something that is, to me, hugely overdue. No criticism intended there, but this is something that's hugely overdue, and I think that this is something that the board is absolutely designed for. I mean, I think all of us have, in my conversations with the board, all of us have longed for this particular opportunity to get involved with how can we make this thing work. And anything that we can do, anything that I can do to be involved in it. I teach, I understand exactly, or at least I understand in my own little bailiwick, I understand how incredibly challenging this is for my students as far as learning in this environment. And I've seen probably double the number of failures in my classes. I've seen, and D's, again, probably doubled in my classes, and I have done what I could. I reach out, but they drift away. I mean, they just it's you can reach and reach and reach, and the kids just drift past you. They get less and less involved, and it's hugely frustrating for teachers. I mean, it's hugely frustrating for me, and I can't imagine that it is any less, or I would expect it to be more frustrating for you administrators to see this, just kind of becoming out of your reach. So one of the practical things that it seems that you have been doing is, or maybe this is in some form of mitigation, but it seems that, and I don't do this, I'm not allowed to do this, is home visits. I mean, these home visits. And have you found that these home visits are of value? I can't imagine them not being of value, but have you found them to be of value? And do we need to increase those? Do we need to put more money or effort or people, or I mean, what can we do to increase the effectiveness of our losing touch with our students in this dire conditions under these very difficult circumstances? So I know it's a big question, but what can we do? What is on your checklist of things to say, I've got to do something? Reach out to us. That's what this board is for, is reach out to us and say, I need help here, or can we be of assistance in doing that?
Well, and it's obvious based on the statistics that a huge factor in this is environmental. I mean, because that seems to be the number that really stands out, right, in the statistics. And so that's not something I don't think that a teacher could address from a computer necessarily. So, those are the types of things I think Jeff and I are kind of speaking from the same Bible here in terms of that's what I'm wondering too is, is anyone out there having success, or can we be creative and find ways to address some of the environmental issues that exist and try to get some level of engagement that, a bump it somehow.
In a way, how could it not? If if the environment is as I expect it is, how could it not be? I mean, in the best of environments, the computer and 6 other people dealing with the computer at home, and your parents staying home from work, and all of the things and odds and ends that go on. I mean, I'm long since past that stage, so thank God for me. But as far as what's happening for you guys and all of those people that are watching this thing drift away I was talking about things drifting away, my students drifting away from me. Well, children are also drifting away from school. I mean, they must feel that huge drift and the frustration that they have in that environment. I mean, an environment in which 6 people are competing for your time and effort, and maybe the hardware. It just
May I say, let me add something, is that our CNI team, our instructional coach team, many of our administrators and many teachers, that is one thing we are working on all the time. Reading articles all weekend, contacting people we know in other districts, trying out new practices, getting new things. If we find something that's working, getting that out ASAP to all the staff so they can try it. So that is something that we are constantly having to work on to try to increase that engagement. And it has increased. And as far as rigor goes, I mean, being a high school parent, I don't feel, and we are only teaching half day, right now, but the rigor has been intense for my child. I mean, it's been intense. I mean, it's different, but I'm excited for him, to be honest with you, that this happened, because I think he will be better ready for college, because he's had to independently work on things. I'm not there. His teacher isn't standing next to him. So I do think some gains have been made in those areas, but you're right. We have to continue to improve this, because you're right, it's not going away, and I want to improve it.
Well, and I think it's important to note that we're not necessarily attacking here, right? What we're saying is, show us where to throw the resources and we'll throw them at it. At least that's what I feel like we're saying, right? Is
tell us where we can get involved is more really what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about here. I'm certainly not doing it as a way of saying, hey, you guys are really letting everyone down here.
No, I just wanted you to know we are working on it, and believe me, we will be coming forward in February with some suggestions and ideas and help we need.
Yeah, I think, just to kind of jump in, I'm not sure if this is still a high school discussion or if it's kind of more of a K-12. Anything, to go back to the original question about the value of the home visits, anything we can do to partner and connect with our parents and with the community, I think is a step in the right direction. To go back to the idea of a remote learning task force, I think that's a good idea. I'd be, interested in having some conversation with some of my colleagues about that. Because those two key things, how do we, number one, navigate remote learning, and number two, how do we make sure we're partnering with parents and with community members all at the same time? I don't know that is going to get us to an easy answer, but I think that will get us to the path where we can begin to kind of unearth some of those problems.
And I like the idea of parents, because that's where you can start to really uncover some of the environmental challenges that exist. And be creative about how to maybe address them. So I love the sound of that, James.
Pardon me again. Sorry. They say, if we want to get these meetings over with more quickly, let's put tape over Jeff's mouth. But the point being here that I think that it seems to me, just from my observations, and by the way, since I teach, I understand it, less so for me that parents, but by golly, we have had a problem with getting parents to come to us. But these machines let us go to the parents. So it seems to me that we've got an opportunity with these machines we're looking at here to reach out. I mean, their kids are doing it. They can say, here, I've got to get my mom on or my dad onto the machine, and we all get together and we talk and brainstorm. So in a sense, it gives us a great opportunity to get parents involved where we haven't been able to bring them. I mean, it is like pulling teeth to get them into this room right here and get all the parents in. But boy, I tell you, this thing might be an opportunity for us to get parents. So I think we need to reach out to those parents, but I don't know. I'm certainly not the professional in this case, but I just feel like we've got these opportunities, and I feel helpless. I mean, to a certain extent, some of the time anyway, I feel helpless when I watch people drift away in this environment. And it's very challenging, I'm sure, for all of you And I just feel like it benefit from other people's experiences in that area. I'd love to see it. I'd love to be of assistance.
We probably just scratched the surface of this topic. It's obviously a topic the board is very interested in. It will not be the last time you hear about it. And we got some good suggestions, and we'll need to come back to you very soon.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other comments?
We could go all night on this topic.
Thank you. And then James, if you can redo that graph with the Hispanic numbers in it and shoot that back out, that would be great.
And thank you to you all.
Okay. We'll go ahead and move forward to the next item, which is the 2021-2022 school calendar.
No, hold on. It's the health examination exclusion date.
I'm skipping around tonight. I apologize. Next is the change to the health examination exclusion date. Mr. Kyle Gerdes, this is a information item?
Just information only. Kyle, give us the update.
Yep. So currently all students are required to present appropriate proof of health examination and immunizations while they enter kindergarten or first grade, sixth grade and ninth graders, as well as any student who's enrolling in an Illinois school for the first time. Our current board policy has two different dates for those exclusions. So September 15th is the exclusion date for health examinations, and October 15th is the exclusion date for immunizations. It's a recommendation from our school nurse, or in consultation with our school nurses, but it's our recommendation to move the exclusion date for health examinations from September 15th to October 15th, which will make it consistent with the immunization exclusion date. I think the benefit for this is that it gives our families a little bit of extra time at the start of the school year to be able to make those appointments needed for those health examinations, as well as it just kind of clears up a little bit of that confusion that our families may have as far as having two different dates that they have to look at when they're either looking for immunizations or their health physicals. So our recommendation would be to move that the date to October 15th for both.
Okay, quick question. Makes sense. But why is it that way to begin with? And is there any drawbacks to moving it back?
That's a great question. I'm not sure why the board policy has that difference as far as September 15th to October 15th. I think we're still going to have the there's always going to be the need to kind of work with parents to help them be aware of those exclusion dates and then assist when needed to help them make appointments or to find the necessary means to get to those appointments for their kids. So I still think there's going to be some things that we have to work around there. What I do think it's going to help with, especially, you know, it's not uncommon for us to see a little bit of a bump in enrollment right after Labor Day weekend. So what I do think it is for those students who are going to start, you know, after that Labor Day weekend, giving them a little bit more time to make sure that they have that appropriate paperwork in before they're excluded from school right after they tried to enroll.
There's no like insurance ramifications or anything like that, right? To this, I wouldn't think, right? Cool, thanks.
We'll be back to the board for board action on this in February.
Okay, then the next item is the 2021-2022 school calendar. Mr. Griff Powell.
Yes, we're looking at tentatively August 18th for the first day of student attendance, December 23rd through January 6th for the winter break and the spring. We need to establish a general calendar. Parents might want, I know it sounds crazy, but they might want to take a vacation this summer and to know when we expect students to start school. Even though we will ask you to approve of the calendar in February, we understand that with the pandemic, this can be changed throughout the next 5-6 months. So right up until July, if you want to adjust the calendar, you can, just like we did back in August. But I think it's a good idea to tell the community this is our intention of when we're going to start school for the 21-22 school year. So again, it's something that will be very tentative and probably will change in the next several months. But I think it's still the right thing to do to give that information to the community. Sure.
So my question is, so just looking at, like, glancing at that, on winter break, we go back on the Thursday
Correct.
instead of we don't have that Friday off?
It'd be a 2-day week coming back.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, yep.
It's similar to what we did this year. Very similar.
Okay.
And repeat the starting date, please.
August 18th.
Thank you.
That'd be the first student attendance. 2 days before, we'd have institute days for our staff.
Thank you.
Again, very tentative, and it'll probably be changed multiple times between now and August. But I think you have to give at least the community our tentative plan. If I want to take a vacation, I want to know when I have kids back in school. It's just that simple. So.
May I ask a question, Griff?
Sure.
I think I saw Kim might have left, but I think this was the first year this year that we pushed parent-teacher conferences back to, right before Thanksgiving break. And I was just wondering, I saw that is repeated again. I was just wondering for elementary if that went well. I know that elementary was the one that was most impacted or wanted that the most because it lined up with their trimesters. So do you have any information on that?
Kim's still here.
Kim is still here, Samantha.
Oh, I thought it came across that she left. Maybe she had to leave and rejoin.
Okay.
We have the benefit of looking at her.
Kim? Oh, hold on. Kim is coming to the microphone. She prematurely turned off her computer.
No problem. Sorry. I was just, it's not super important. I just was wondering.
Your questions is important.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My computer died just now. So I missed the question. What was the question?
I was just wondering, I saw this year was the first year we moved parent-teacher conferences in the fall to right before Thanksgiving, and I believe that was to the benefit of elementary mostly because they have like trimesters rather than quarters or semesters. And so I was just wondering how that worked because I saw it's also in the calendar for next year.
Yes, that worked really well. When they decided to do that, the decision was because we get more attendance in elementary than we do as the kids get older. And the teacher said that worked really well. And they still had really good attendance. I mean, even virtually or on the phone.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions on the calendar? No? Okay, with that, we will go ahead and adjourn to closed session. Can we go ahead and, recommended action is that the Board of Education adjourn to closed session for discussion regarding a former employee and potential litigation. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Roll call?
Jeff Algren,
Yes.
Samantha McDavid,
Yes.
Sarah Moses,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Jeremy Olson,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
David Seymour.
Yes.
You go home.
Okay, so we all have to hop out of this one and then hop into closed session.
There'll be no action